Good afternoon. Welcome to this afternoon's webinar, NAESP webinar on managing mental health issues. With us today, we have Janine Thomas and Joy Winchester, who will be our speakers. I would invite all of you to download today's presentation, which can be found on the NAESP website. I've put the address in the chat box there. Please open your chat box, and we invite you to use the chat box to write in questions and comments as we go through. I'd invite all of you to use the drop-down menu and select all panelists and attendees so that everybody can see your comments. So with that, I will go ahead and stop showing my video, and I will go to introduce our first speaker. Joy Winchester is with the Alabama Department of Early Childhood Education. She is the Director of the Office of Early Childhood Development and Professional Support. She assists with challenging behaviors and professional development in neuroscience, and brain develops to understand behaviors of adults and children. Welcome, Joy. Let's hear what you have to say.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. So glad that we're all able to get together. And I guess the first question I have is, when you hear the word mental health, what does it mean to you? Or why should mental health be in focus for educators? And please put your comments in the chat box, because I'd like to know where we're starting with everyone.
And we'll take a moment here to allow people to write in their comments. So there was a comment here in the chat box about the link for downloading the materials. Those can be found on the coronavirus website. I've given you the link there. Just scroll down to Managing Mental Health Issues, and it says download slides.
So Stephanie says that educators have to understand mental health because it impacts learning. And that is extremely true. We actually have to link the social and the academic child. Mental health, from Frederick, is crucial for educators to reach the whole child to effectively educate. Brianni Carr says mental health is the emotional and social well-being. And yes, Michael, you're right. Maslow's before Bloom. A lot of us right now are experiencing what it means to feel maybe unstable or unsafe. And so learning is kind of difficult right now. Laura says it's your well-being. It affects your thoughts, your behaviors, your emotions. And what we'll get into is that it also impacts your health. And so one of the pieces that as we move through these, that we have to know the child's whole story. We have, as educators, I've been in education for over 20 years, and we have to educate more than the academic mind. And so that was where my drive to get into neuroscience really pushed me as a teacher, because I realized that I could write amazing lesson plans, but I was not reaching my children. Next, please, Honor. So as we're in this COVID situation, we have to kind of realize or step back and realize that our new normal is tough. And so I'm just going to go through 3 simple brain facts, just 3 brain facts. And if we know the brain is pattern seeking, your brain loves patterns. It looks for patterns in everyday life. And so in this new situation, a lot of us have lost our patterns. I know that I still set my alarm to get up at the same time that I get up when I'm not working from home, because my body loves patterns. Our brain likes routine and structures. And sometimes in this new world, some of us can't find patterns, and we start to become rigid or inflexible in our thinking. And then some of us can make new patterns, and that is actually where we see resilience. The other thing about the brain is it's survival oriented. The brain's job is not to think big thoughts. The brain's job is to keep you alive. And so when we are stressed, the brain says, no new thoughts. We are going to just keep you alive. And this is where you have people reacting instead of responding. This is where you have people buying 40 rolls of toilet paper when they probably only need 10. This is where people react, and we don't understand the behaviors sometimes. It's very interesting that when I work with children who are in their survival brain or the survival mode, problem solving is not there. It's not accessible. Well, the other thing we know is the brain is the only organ that develops with social interaction. Our brains crave other interactions from our people. We crave that. And so we need connections to grow. We know children who do not have authentic, engaging connections do not have the same gray matter as children who have these wonderful, connected, engaged adults around them. But connection actually is eye contact, touch, being present, and being happy. And the way I can describe this is, imagine if you're walking down the street and you see a person walking next, your friend is coming to you. And the first thing you do is you say, hi, and your face lights up and you give them a hug and you're like, how are you? I'm good. That is how we like to be greeted. That is a connection. Children have the same need. And in fact, if we saw that same person, our same friend, and we said to them, hi, and they said, hey, I got to go, shoot me an email, I'm late, and they walked off, we would actually be a little hurt or put out, because we need those 4 elements of connection. Children do too. In our new normal, with our new technology does not provide the same. It does not give us what we are craving, what our brains are needing right now. So we are doing the best we can with Zoom teaching and Zoom calls, but it's not the same. And so social distancing is actually asking us to do the opposite of what our brain needs to grow. And this is really important as we ask our teachers to do social learning or teaching children from these social distances. As an educator, I was never taught how to teach children on a Zoom call. That was not in any of my classes. And so this is a new skill that some of our teachers are struggling with as well. Next, Honor. So in addition to what we're doing now, what if that we knew the cause of most chronic disease and mental illness and violence in America? And we do know the cause. It's adverse childhood experiences. And they're called ACEs. And these are things that happen to you 0 to 18, but especially 0 to 8. And they impact you for the rest of your life. And these, I have the ACEs listed here, and I know a lot of us are become very fluent in ACEs, but this is physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. And unfortunately, a lot of the reports right now are telling us that child abuse, because of our current situation being at home, our parents are stressed out and abuse rates are increasing nationally. Emotional neglect. And emotional neglect is also can be a mother or father addicted to a cell phone. So if that infant, if that toddler, if that 4-year-old, 5-year-old is trying to get their parents' attention, but they're dialed into technology, it can rewire the brain, same as emotional neglect. Seeing a mother be abused, living with a family member with mental illness, incarcerated or addicted. And mental illness is anxiety and depression. And we have the highest rates of anxiety and depression ever reported in America at this time. The other thing is incarceration. In the last 30 years in America, we've had a 500% increase in incarceration. 500% increase. Incarceration is impacting more of our children. And of course, losing a parent to separation and divorce or any other reason. What is important is that if you have 4 or more ACEs, then you have a 75% more chance of having heart disease, cancer, autoimmune diseases as an adult. 6 or more ACEs, and you will lose 20 years off of your life. And what happens is when a child has adverse childhood experiences, their cortisol rises, and this becomes their norm. And this norm is what ends up making that the cortisol is high, and then therefore it changes the actual structure, the actual chemistry. And so your arteries get narrow, or it's not safe to have high levels of cortisol. And this becomes the children's norm. What is great is, you remember I told you brains are pattern seeking? If you pulled up, let's say you had the worst day ever, and your favorite person, you wanted to see your favorite person. So you pull up at home and your favorite person opens the door. How do you feel? What is that feeling you get when you've had a really bad day and you see your person? Okay. Ask yourself this as principals. When your children pull up into your parking lot at school, do they get that feeling? Because if they do, the brain is pattern seeking. And every time they come to your school, if they're loved, if they're accepted, if they're safe, the cortisol will drop. And therefore at school, they can learn. And then when they go home, their cortisol will rise again because of their situations. But teachers ask me a lot, what can I do for this child if I know I'm sending them back to a tough home life? What you can do is offer them 8 hours of feeling safe and connected, and the brain will respond to that. So ask yourself, when your children pull up, what is their response to seeing their school? Is it the same response you get when you see your favorite person? Because if that's what they get, then you can overcome ACEs. And so it's not a death sentence, but if we're aware of it, we can fix it. Next, please. Why should principals be concerned? This is an easy slide. The more adverse childhood experiences a child experiences, the more academic problems they will have. And so as I work with, sometimes our principals don't understand that why should we be concerned? I went to school to be a teacher, not a psychiatrist. I'm not mental health. And this is where, if we understand trauma impacts academics, you can have the best curriculum there is. You can have the best learning strategies there are, but they're not going to make a difference if the child is not ready to learn. All right, change please. So this is my new favorite slide. I'm a little bit of a nerd, but this is a great slide because a lot of times I'm called into schools to work with kids who do not have a special ed diagnosis, but they're wearing everybody out. And I'm sure you have one or two or more of these children. But this slide is pretty neat for me, and it helps me see it, so I wanted to share it. If you see, each ball is a severity of a challenge area that a child can have. It can be attention, reading, social, motor, home life, behavior. So each ball is a challenge that they have. The more balls, the more challenges they have. So drop down to the second level. The second level, the canister has a line of blue, light blue balls. And if it crosses that line at the top, they qualify. They get services. So this little guy right here has a lot of blue balls in the area of literacy. Therefore, he qualifies. And he'll have a team to work with him for his IEP. The child sitting next to him does not qualify for any services, but has more balls across the spectrum. This means that this child has more needs, but no one knows how to reach this little fella. And this is where these kids right here are the ones that burn your teachers out, because special education struggles with them, teachers struggle, principals struggle, we all struggle. And a lot of times I'll hear, Joy, he is so smart, he knows better. And yes, these children are brilliant. The point is that sometimes they have so many balls and they're not qualifying that we struggle with how to help them. And this is where understanding the brain, to understand understanding the brain to understand behavior helps me handle and I hate to say handle, engage with the most difficult kids. Rosemary asked how many ACEs correspond with 20 years. It's 6 ACEs, and that's really not a lot. All right, next, please, Honor. All right, so there are a lot of different social emotional learning programs out there, and I am not one to say one is great and one is bad because what I have found is I'm trained in quite a few of them, and when I work with the school, I try to find the one that fits the school's philosophy the best. I'm trying to say that as politically correct as possible. What I will say is this model right here is from Conscious Discipline. And this is actually based off of Bruce Perry's work, which is rooted in trauma. And this is the neurosequential model of the brain. And this is pretty cool because what it does is this is brain scans. And this shows us that every brain, yours included, you have 3 functioning brains in your head. And when you're stressed, some work and some work a little too hard. So let's start at the bottom, the survival state or the brain stem. This one comes online in utero, and it's only responsible is to keep you alive. You can do 3 things and 3 things only in this brain: fight, flight, or freeze. And so this is brain, we share it with reptiles. And in legal defense, this is called the reptilian effect. And you've seen this on police shows where they're going to arrest a criminal and they will fight, they will run, and the police will say, stop moving, and they literally can't. Let me put it in your language that you might have happen at your house. My husband likes to play tricks on me, and so sometimes he will jump out from behind the door and go boom, and my response is to go boom, boom, to throw a punch. That is, and I love my husband, but that is a fight response. So when I'm scared, I drop to fight. Some people drop to freeze, which they shut down. Okay. The next brain is your limbic brain. It's your emotional state. In this brain, we share with every single animal that lives in a pack. This is why connection is so important to us. We have to live in a pack. That's how we survive. We don't do well alone. In fact, if you think about prisons, the worst punishment is solitary confinement. This brain, you get verbal aggression. This is where we like just to be like, wah, wah, wah. We call names, we say ugly things. This is this brain. And unfortunately, ladies, I'm sorry, we have 8 times more blood flow to this brain than men. And this is why men can sometimes be absolutely worthless to us when we have a problem, because we want to talk about it and they want to fix it. And this is where we feel like we're not heard. And so the last week I had a terrible day at work, and I called my husband and said, I'm done. I want to quit my job. And he said, good, quit your job. Sounds like a great idea. And of course I'm like, oh, you never listened to me. Why are you not listening to me? And he's like, what's wrong with you? You say you want to quit. Solution, quit. I want to be heard. So I called a coworker and I said, I want to quit my job. And she said, I want to quit my job too. And we talked about it for 45 minutes and then we were fine. Women like to talk things through. We love this brain. This brain can get us in a little bit of trouble though, because this brain can make us lose about 50 IQ points. So we'll say things like, you never take the trash out. You always overtalk. And sometimes when I hear teachers, they'll say, Joy, I need you to help me with this kid. He always hits. He never listens. Did this sound familiar? What you have is a teacher who is in this brain. And the first thing I do, because this brain looks for connection, is I connect the teacher to the child. Because if I can get her connected to that kid, I can open up her green brain. And her green brain is her prefrontal cortex. This is our human brain. We are able to think things through and have free choice. And this brain is, what can I learn from this situation? This is our problem-solving brain. Now, principals on this call, let me tell you, none of your children come to school in the green brain. They come to school, most of them, in the blue brain. They open that door and they're looking for someone to say, good morning, eye contact. How are you? I'm so glad you're here. Playful. Tell me something about your day. Engaging, and then give them a hug, touch. If a child has that, they'll open up to the green brain. If they don't have that, they drop to the red and they say, okay, am I safe here? And sometimes I'll hear a child say, Miss Joy, look at what I brought from school. Look what I brought from home. And the teacher will say, put that up. Come on, we gotta go. We'll look at it later. Let's roll. This is where children will shut down. Okay? What I tell the teens, I work with teens as well, and what I tell them is this: you have a choice every day in life. You can choose to be in your blue brain or your red brain. You have a choice, because that's what makes humans awesome. So if you choose to be in your animal brain, you will react instead of respond. If you choose to be in your green brain, then you're being a human, and that's what we'll need you to do. All right, change please, Honor. So what we know as teachers is we were trained to these executive skills, and they live in that green brain. They live right up there on top. And here's the thing though, they turn on when a child says why, but they develop until the age of 25 for women, 30 for men. That's okay, we got you. And here's the other thing, children with ADHD, true medical diagnosed ADHD, they have a 30% delay in these executive functioning skills. And so as principals, I need you to understand that when you have a child with a delay in these skills, they look immature. And so if you have a 30% delay, and this is based on the work from Dr. Russell Barkley, if you have a 9-year-old, his executive skills are at the age of 6. Think about that. If you have a 12-year-old, the executive skills are 8 years of age. This is why these kids struggle so hard. Honor, change, please. I know we're flying. These are a list of the executive functioning skills that teachers love. I want a kid who can come in and pay attention, get her books out. Let's get started on your work. I want a kid who can control their words. I want a kid who can remember why or what's next in a step. But I have something to tell you. The only way a child has these skills, remember they turn on at 3 or 4, is if an adult in their life has them. Have you ever met a child and you're really sure it's a diagnosis, like you know you need a referral, and then you meet mom and you realize, oh, it's an apple tree problem? This is where if mama doesn't have the skill, child won't have the skill. So where do they get the skills from? You and your teachers. And this is where your teachers have got to be in their green brain, in their thinking brain, in their human brain. And that's tough because when we're stressed, next please, Honor, we lose access to this brain. Have you ever, and these are just some samples, have you ever been looking at somebody and they're like, so what do you think? And you say, I'm sorry, one more time, I wasn't listening. Or how about this one? Have you ever walked into Walmart, working memory, come out of your store and have no idea where you parked your car? We know, and a lot of times when I do trainings with teachers, we'll laugh about this. And I'll ask them, and I'll have one teacher play a game with me, and I'll say, okay, let's do this game. I'll say, where's your car? And the teacher will say, and she'll smile and say, it's over there. And I'll say, no, where's your car? And I'll change my face to how a teacher will speak to children when they can't find their lunchbox, when they can't find their shoes, when they can't find their homework. See, we laugh when we lose a $30,000 car because we understand stress, but a child loses a book bag and he's doing it on purpose. But a stressed out child's brain, which is not yet developed, can have all of this as well. And this is where we have to build these skills. These are executive skills. These are the same as academic skills. And if they come from a family that doesn't have these skills, then you are the only one who can really teach this to them. But your teachers have to be calm, and they have to be ready to see this not as these kids are disobedient, these kids are bad. They have to see these kids as, wow, they're lacking some executive functioning skills because they just turned on. They're going to develop to the age of 25. So how do I help build this in these children? Next, please, Honor. So if you're interested in this model, this is conscious discipline. However, I will say this. Many models out there do use the neurosequential model of the brain. It's rooted in neuroscience. If you believe in Maslow's, then you believe in the neurosequential model of the brain. In other words, the survival brain, the red brain, which is looking for safety, is your psychological needs and your physical needs are met. Your connections is your limbic brain. And then your top, your executive skills, your learning your skills, your self-actualization, that's your green brain. So if you believe in Maslow's, which I think most of us do, then you understand the neurosequential model of the brain. We just have brain scans now. But here's the thing about conscious discipline. And I'm so glad Jen is going next because hers is phenomenal. Teachers first. If the adults are not secure, then the children will not be. Children can never be in a higher brain state than the adults that they're connected to. So if you have stressed out teachers, you'll have stressed out kids. Before I pass it on to an amazing person, is there any questions for me? Went to the refrigerator to get my lunch at work, closed the door, stood back and pointed my keys at the fridge and pressed my keys waiting for the beeping. Yes, yes, Lenore, that is stuff. We all understand that when we are stressed, we are shadows of ourselves. And I try to get people to understand when you're stressed, you're not the person you were born to be. You are a shadow. So how do we come out of that? All right. Well, Jen's going to tell us that. So thank you so much.
You're a tough act to follow, Joy.
Yeah, you are. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Joy. Let me introduce Jen Thomas. Jen is a principal of Olive B. Loss Elementary School in Delaware's Appo School District. That's what the natives call it, Appo.
Yep.
I'd rather say that than the word. She's served as an administrator for 12 years and is leading 3 different buildings across 2 states. And like all educators, she wears many hats of the day. So now you'll get a principal's perspective on all of this.
Mm-hmm. And all those memes that you see out there now in terms of being quarantined with a teacher. I have 2 kids who are normally in school with me, their mom, the principal. Now they're stuck at the dining room table doing remote learning with me. So this is a learning experience for all of us and definitely an opportunity to grow our mental health together. You can head over to the next. So it's been great to be able to listen to Joy's presentation and also see the comments of different attendees in the chat box as we launch the second half of our time together. If folks would like to share 2 things. Number 1, what are 2 things you're doing well these days to support your emotional, psychological, and social well-being? And hopefully you have more than 2, but and then the next question is kind of tougher. It's very reflective and very honest. What's one thing that you deserve to do well? We are educators by default. I think that would probably mean most of us attending today are women. We tend to give, we tend to put others before ourselves. So I'm seeing some comments coming in. We're exercising, catching up, reading a good book. Quiet time, talk about a gift. Movies, FaceTime, yeah, family meals, sleeping better. Wonderful. I'm with you, Patricia. I'm a cleaner. You guys are fantastic. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to go back through all of these. This is great. Minnesota weather. Oh, lovely. Honor, you can go on to the next slide. So Joy and I had never met before. We'd never worked together prior to collaborating on this, but I love that our different presentations are really going to piggyback off of one another nicely. So on our first slide here, we have, think about who's really coming to school these days, right? We need to be honest if we're going to be impactful. Educators have become increasingly aware of the impact of ACEs, right? Those adverse childhood experiences, and the impact that these ACEs can have on our students. But as administrators, we have to acknowledge that there's significant levels of stress being experienced by our teachers as well, right? So we say kids with ACEs encounter many faces. And what are those faces? Who are those faces? They're fragile adults confronting emotions. This really impacts our ability to sustain strong and effective supports, right? Professionally, educators face increasingly steep expectations with fewer resources available to meet the diverse and complex needs of our students. Personally, though, educators are seeking to balance work with the demands of family, caring for children, taking care of themselves. So as leaders, we need to cultivate that emotional resilience in our educators and help build a culture of acknowledgement and empathy and community, right? So as with everything in education, resilience in educators starts with our kids. Who's coming to school these days? And whether you are teaching in Alabama or Delaware, from sea to shining sea, I think we can all identify friends we've worked with who fit into many of these student boxes. And it's great because these reflections are very insightful in terms of guiding our responsive teaching practices. This is where trauma awareness and cultural competency, inclusive practices, differentiation, wraparound services, all speak to the diverse pool of students who are coming in. But what if, as administrators, we asked a follow-up question and we looked at who's really coming to teach these days, right? So I'll say I am blessed to work in a phenomenal school. We've been recognized as a Blue Ribbon School of Academic Excellence. Our Smarter Balance scores are historically pretty high performing. #1 public elementary school rated in the state. So we have a lot of great things to celebrate. But my staff, my wonderful, highly effective staff, even pre-pandemic, reads like a beautiful mashup of bad reality show meets soap opera, right? And we are just your typical public school staff. I've got seniority that ranges the gamut from fresh out of college to months away from retirement. I've got teachers who are supporting immediate family members with terminal diagnoses, teachers who have lost an immediate family member this year, teachers who have students who have lost a parent sitting in their classes this year, teachers who are expecting or who are trying to conceive, teachers going through divorce and custody battles, working multiple jobs, single parents. I've got about a dozen teachers who have their personal children in our school, so they're wearing both hats on a day-to-day basis as well. Teachers with physical disabilities and teachers with mental health struggles as well. So you take this cast of characters, the students arrive, those students listed there in that box, and their teacher's day unfolds, which we know could look like anything and everything. So there's an unplanned fire drill, there's an announcement of a mandatory meeting on Wednesday, you've got an upset parent at the front door 5 minutes before school starts, somebody rolls their eyes at you, the copy machine broke, and then your principal asks you to cover a class because substitutes are short, right? You can go to the next slide. And we wonder why social emotional learning is a challenge. We've got ourselves set up for a social emotional disaster, right? SEL involves self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. However, our schools are filled with a cast of highly dysregulated people, children and adults, and we're expecting them to react rather than respond. because that's all they're able to do. We're expecting our teachers to thrive when really many of them are struggling simply to survive. So we're much more comfortable looking at the impact that this trauma and this toxic stress has on our students as learners, right? We can put that somewhere else. That's on someone else's plate. But if we stop and think that these same children who are struggling with attention and focus and processing, who are feeling frustrated and anxious, if the grown-ups standing in front of them are also feeling a little more irritable and impatient, are also having a hard time planning and concentrating, and are struggling to bring those same positive emotions to the classroom, that's why we've got some of these problems. Next slide, please, Honor. To Joy's point, we're talking about responding versus reacting. So we know teaching is emotional work. It's inherently stressful. Roughly 500,000 US teachers leave the profession every year, which is a turnover rate of about 20%. Teacher attrition among first-year teachers has increased by 40% over the past 2 decades. Kids need passionate, effective, committed teachers who can manage their physical and emotional stressors, enjoy life more, and fulfill their purpose as educators. So as building leaders, we need to consider that what's needed is not more professional development on deconstructing the standards or academic discourse or using data to drive instruction. What's really needed is time, space, and attention to managing stress and cultivating resilience. So how can we do that? Well, in just 4 easy slides, we'll have the answer. You can go to the next slide, Honor. So one area that I would encourage us as a system of public educators to really concentrate our energy towards is mentoring, right? If we could design and implement and improve mentoring programs for our new teachers to bring the supports from non-existent to really people-driven, I think we'll find that we get the most bang for our buck. So what does that look like? Well, it starts at that foundational level of rethinking the program elements that affect mentors, starting with as basic as your mentor selection criteria, right? Are we identifying mentors based on who raises their hand at a faculty meeting to volunteer, or the first person to respond to an all-staff email? Or are we really looking for those individuals who have the same commitment to growing educators in their profession as they do to growing the growth of their students, right? And then once we have those mentors identified, are we giving them an opportunity for continued growth, right? It's one thing to be an amazing educator, to be able to stand up in front of a class of students and help get all of those light bulbs going off. But when you take that phenomenal teacher and you now charge her with mentoring a novice educator, we're talking about interpersonal relationships, coaching skills. That mentor has just as much right to growth as the mentee. And then there's just the regular human capital struggles and challenges that come in a mentoring relationship, right? There's very muddied professional roles. On the one hand, you're my colleague across the hall. On the other hand, it could feel like you're kind of judging and evaluating sometimes, but I need that constructive feedback. So how do I marry the two? And then the details of how do we do this mentoring thing and when are we going to do this mentoring thing? Those are real practical challenges that deserve to be thought of before the relationship launches, right? It's really hard to have an effective mentoring program in place when you're building that plane in flight. Once you have those basic foundational elements taken care of, I think then we owe it to ourselves and to our profession to really try to make sure that our mentoring programs are addressing the real challenges that novice educators face, right? We need to be honest with one another. These 22-year-olds are coming out of college having accepted their first job, but little did they know teaching is not a job. This is a lifestyle. And whether you were ready for it or not, it's here and it's not going anywhere, at least for the next 10 months. So how are we going to acclimate to this? everything is so inefficient for first-year teachers. They work so hard, but there's so much unfamiliar material. The students are new, the content is new, the grade level is new, the material is new. So you find people spinning their wheels for umpteen hours only to keep their head above water, and then having to repeat that same process again for the very next day. Clearly, this leads to stress and fatigue, not only physical, but also mental, right? And there's no class or textbook that's going to prepare first-year teachers for being able to meet the diverse needs of all of the kids who sit in front of them. Even our veteran educators struggle with this. And then the last thought I would offer in terms of really improving our mentoring system is to take that same lens of differentiation that we very comfortably work through in terms of teachers and apply that approach to how we're supporting novice educators. So does the mentor need to come in more as an information provider, filling very low-level needs? This is how you log into our system. This is how you use our software for taking attendance. This is how we use the copier. Here's how you request a substitute, right? If that's all we're ready for right now, that's important stuff to know, to get under our belts and to feel a little more, okay, I've got this. I'm ready for the next level. What's that next level? Those mid-level needs. That's when we're looking for mentors to be more thought partners. So this might be time for the mentor and mentee to sit down and really look at the physical layout of their classroom, or determine what's the best way to collect grades and have all of that information entered into a log. How can I write an informal script so that I feel a little more prepared for my first round of parent-teacher conferences? And then as the relationship builds, as the mentee is feeling ready for that next level of support, the mentor can really start to offer some higher level supports. So maybe we're going to sit down together and craft a handful of critical thinking questions that really gauge what a student understands and has mastered. Or maybe it's time for us to sit down and collaboratively plan some differentiated instruction, or make our literacy centers even that more engaging to hold students accountable. If we can take those different elements and really commit to them from a mentoring perspective, I think not only will we grow and support newcomers to our profession, we'll help those who start to feel burnt out and start to kind of lose their joy and their purpose, re-energize and renew their excitement for what they do each and every day. Next slide, Otter. Thanks. Mindfulness, I feel like this is a buzzword in education these days, even before our current situation, but it's more applicable than ever, right? Mindfulness, as someone who is not an expert in any way, I don't even know how to do the simplest of yoga poses. I think of it as being aware of what's happening right now, just being aware without wishing it were different. So that means if things are going well, enjoy them, but don't hold on to them because they're gonna change. And if things are not going well, just accept that without fearing that it's always going to be this horrible, because you know it won't, right? In school, we talk about you can't stop the wave, but you can learn how to surf. And our kids will go like this. Can't stop the wave. You're going to have good days. You're going to have bad days. Even within one day, you're going to have high points and low points. There's nothing wrong with you. It's not a problem. You didn't do anything to deserve this, right? That's just life. It's called being human. You can't stop that. But by being a little more mindful, you can learn to ride those highs and lows a little more smoothly without letting it throw you completely off your course. So on a day-to-day basis, what are some practical little things you might be able to do to infuse those elements of mindfulness into your school community? We started doing our day every day with a mindful mantra. So part of our morning announcements, everyone shares the Pledge of Allegiance together. We go through a couple of nuts and bolts news to know for the day. And then our whole school together recites our mindful mantra. And it's just a simple, open-ended community spirit. And in the middle, we pause for quiet and we allow kids to set their intentions, decide what their goal is for the day, what they're going to be working towards. So it goes, I will be the best possible me, growing better every day. And kids have a time to think. They have quiet time to think where no one judges them. And we wrap it back together and say, I know I can achieve my dreams because that's the Wise Owl way, right? So just making that a daily part of our practice, if we can't give ourselves 30 hot seconds to really focus on what we're going to spend 8 hours working towards, we're not going to find ourselves feeling safe and challenged and joyful in our learning. There are a handful of apps out there. Some are familiar, some might be new resources for educators. Calm is really great for helping focus on that quiet and that intentionality. Headspace is right now giving teachers full access to a whole series of exercises and resources, meditation, sleeps, stress and anxiety, different options for movement and healthy living. And then a newer one that I've just kind of started diving into, I would encourage you to check out, is Pure Edge. So Pure Edge is providing strategies to support educators' self-care through breath, movement, and stress reduction. And their whole idea, their whole philosophy is that educators dedicate themselves to empowering young people. So we need these educators to be able to model how you build and nurture positive relationships. And then although it's not in an app and there is no technology that's going to replace it, two of the most powerful ways to grow mindfulness are gratitude and laughter. And even if you think all of this breathing and intention setting is kind of hippie mumbo jumbo, and you're more of a science person, there's science to support that gratitude and laughter really develop your mindfulness. So gratitude improves our physical health. People who are grateful have fewer aches and pains. They report feeling healthier. They're more likely to exercise. They go for their checkups more regularly. So that all adds up to greater longevity in your lifespan. Gratitude helps improve our psychological health. So you have less of those toxic emotions of envy and resentment, and frustration, and an increase in happiness. Gratitude enhances our empathy and reduces aggression. It helps people sleep better. Gratitude improves our self-esteem. And if you think about that as an essential component to our optimal performance, that's a great gift we can give ourselves. And it increases our mental strength as well. Laughter is also scientifically proven to enhance our mindfulness. So laughter will lower our blood pressure, reducing the risk of stroke and heart attack. It will reduce our stress hormone levels, cutting anxiety and the impact that that stress has on our bodies. Improves our cardiac health, gets our heart pumping, and burns about that same amount of calories per hour as walking at a slower or moderate pace. So laughing could be your workout for the day. Boosts your T cells, triggers the release of the endorphins, which are your feel-good natural painkillers, and just gives you an overall sense of well-being. My favorite fact about laughing is it exercises the same muscles as if you sat down in the gym and tried to do a series of your sit-ups. So I don't know about you, but I'd rather have a good crack up, maybe laugh myself to tears as a way to get those abs toned, as opposed to having to do 30 sit-ups there over in the basement. Next slide, please. A third idea, and I think that this is probably something that most schools and districts are looking to explore, would be to incorporate a social emotional learning program into their school community. It's going to benefit kids, it's going to benefit grown-ups. It really helps build the entire culture of the school. So if you haven't quite found one that matches your building's philosophy yet, or one that speaks to the needs that you're experiencing, I would encourage folks to check out, CASEL has a great guide that identifies and rates 25 different well-designed, evidence-based social emotional learning programs, and it rates them on their program design and their implementation support and on their evidence of effectiveness. There's really a whole myriad of approaches that buildings can take, and it gives you step-by-step guidance in terms of how to start and how to plan for more long-term implementation and sustainability as well. I think the number one pushback, if we can use that, to the inclusion of a SEL program is we don't have time, right? I've got so many hours in the day. I've got to do this many minutes of math, this much ELA, can't work around science and social studies. I can't do another program. For those folks, I would encourage the text, The Power of Student Teams. And this book takes the idea of social emotional learning and adds a cognitive element. And they do that by academic teaming. So you have students grouped in 2 to 5 small groups, and they're working towards common academic goals with very clear protocols for engaging in standards-based academic work. So the teams are interdependent. They rely on one another with minimal teacher support. The teams are accountable for each other's learning and for the culture of their group. They share a vision and values and a collaborative culture that really fosters trust and empowerment, right? If you think about the strengths that this draws upon, you're touching upon growth mindset, equity, social emotional competencies. You're engaging kids in those 21st century skills, formative assessment, and really getting kids to grapple with that productive struggle. Joy talked a lot about the green brain, right? Our thinking and our problem-solving brain. If you embrace a little bit of SEL or academic teaming with SECL, you're triggering teamwork and challenge. And those are 2 of what I think of as the great 8 fuels that our green brain needs to do its best thinking and problem solving. And last but certainly not least, we need to find balance. And I'm not saying I've achieved it myself, but I'm a work in progress too, right? We should absolutely applaud the amazing educators who go above and beyond to meet the needs of their students. But it's important to remember that teachers are people too. Their parents, their spouses, their children, their friends. And every time they stay late or go in early, they're giving a little more to their students and a little less to themselves. I would say that it's dangerous and it's unfair to romanticize teachers going above and beyond with these behaviors. Celebrating these types of behaviors sends the wrong message, because the message is that overwork and self-sacrifice are commendable behaviors for teachers. And if these behaviors are routinely acknowledged as amazing and outstanding, they'll become the expectation rather than the exception. Normalizing that self-sacrifice is detrimental to individual teachers and to our profession as a whole. So teachers give us so many reasons to celebrate them every day. We need to rewrite the narrative about what makes a great teacher. And by redefining those teaching behaviors and what's really praiseworthy, we're going to be able to create a healthier, more sustainable expectation for both current and future educators. So I would encourage us to start celebrating teachers as lifelong learners, people who are that committed to their profession, who engage in professional development to stay up to date on best practices. Let's celebrate collaboration, right? We know that teaching can feel like a very isolating profession when we close our classroom door, but really when we can share powerful tools and strategies with one another, that's not needing help and leaning on someone as weakness. That's being open to growing and open to giving and taking. Celebrating teachers as risk takers, right? When you try something new in your classroom and it flops, that's fabulous. Celebrate that. They took that safe risk. And now let's reflect together on what we can do to try something next time. Celebrating reflection. Teaching is fast-paced. Every day there's a new challenge. Every day there's a new triumph. It's absolutely exhausting. So teachers who make time to reflect on these real struggles and successes should be celebrated. Whether it's a journal or a quick little thank you note to a colleague across the hall, it's a wonderful, wonderful practice and deserves recognizing. And last but not least, celebrating self-care, right? Teaching is very demanding. So we need to make sure that teachers are prioritizing themselves. If we don't take care of ourselves first, we're not going to do our best work in taking care of others. We need to rewrite that narrative about what makes a great teacher, because if we keep holding on to these unrealistic expectations, we're going to burn out even the brightest lights among us. Our last slide. Thanks. So there's a lot of advice floating around these days, and there's a self-help narrative emerging in the United States saying, you know, here we are in this pandemic situation. When we come out, we're going to be happier and healthier. We'll have learned gratitude and improved all of these new skills, which is lovely, but it's not realistic. The likelihood of us emerging from this time feeling wiser and fitter and more loving and refreshed is pretty unlikely from the get-go. It's not how post-traumatic growth works for most people. And if we keep saying it, it's going to set Americans up who are already dealing with anxiety and depression, loneliness, financial struggles, abuse, all of these stressors. It's going to set them up for failure because depending on your history and your current stressors, right now our pandemic situation could be a frightening disruption to everyday life, or it could be downright traumatic. So be cautious with this story of self-improvement because it can be harmful. We live in a culture where we're trained to run away from negative emotions, and often we want to skip to the end when the person emerges victorious and strong. But our mental health doesn't work that way. Resilience is our ability to get back to normal routines, and resilience can easily take months, even years. Many of us are dealing with post-traumatic issues, so that growth is even deeper. It helps us find purpose and joy after a traumatic event. That could take a lifetime, right? So we really need to be there to care for one another as we get ready to leave this new normal, and hopefully, although we never anticipated we'd be in this situation, envision an even greater future than we thought possible before. That was a lot of talking.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. This has
Yep.
been wonderful. You have one question. Do you believe student teams is appropriate for all grade and age levels?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I've seen it in place as low as kindergarten, and I go up to 8th grade. So it's up to 8th grade. And I would even argue that academic teaming comes more naturally to our little guys because they haven't established those expectations or prejudices or closed themselves off to learning something new. So start them young. They can do it. They'll surprise you.
Okay, well, thank you so much. It looks like we've run out of time, but if the question was asked about your email addresses, they are on the slides. And so please feel free to download that from our website. I've put the address in there, and the video recording for today will be available within 24 hours at that same website. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Joy. We just loved everything you had to share.